Got it.
Got it. Okay, sorry. Please
So
continue.
I'll start over by thanking again this amazing opportunity to speak with you all around the world. This is, you know, with the pandemic, this became an everyday thing, but I think it's amazing that we can do this so well right now. And more especially through Cornell University, which is my alma mater. So I'll start explaining to you about a term that I use in my presentation, that I put a broad focus. So my broad focus could be, you know, weird to say, but focus shouldn't be broad and stuff like that. But you'll understand as we go through the presentation. We all know that multiple evolutionary drivers result in the bioacoustic patterns and behavioral traits that we see in a communication system of your interest, right? So I was interested in dolphins way back when I was a kid. And when I was 20 years old, I came across this book. And I'm going to show you this book now. And let me see. I'm going to share my screen. Oh, wait. I need to share my screen before I go to. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, so I came across this book. I was 20, and it was like Bioacústica Recreativa, recreational bioacoustics. You know, that was a book translated from Russian to Spanish. And I thought it was, you know, close enough to Portuguese that it was worth buying it. So I opened it up and I went right to the part where they're talking about dolphins, right? They had a dolphin on the cover, and I was blown away by the knowledge that already was about how animals communicate and how many theories were behind it. So after that, then I was lucky enough, I guess, to be able to constitute the Laboratory of Bioacoustics at the Federal University of Rio Grande do Norte, where I'm associate professor. Time went by, so I moved up a little bit. And now, this year, we inaugurated the Ecoacoustic Research Hub. And what we do here is we connect sound science. Like Larissa said, we have done sound science for nature for 10 plus years. And now, finally, we have a space. And we had a little bit of resources, now gone in Brazil, to put together this space. The Ecoacoustic Research Hub, we have an archive with sounds and images. We have 2 labs, and we have a workshop where we mess around with equipment, and it's called Christopher Clark Workshop, obviously in honor of Chris Clark. That was my advisor there at Cornell. So the outline for the talk today is broad focus on sound science. So I'm going to start by focusing on animals. What taxa was I interested in, right? So I first started on manatee sound communication, repertoire, and individual identity. I'm going to talk about all that with you guys. Then for my PhD, that was my master's. For my PhD, I went to Cornell to work on humpback whale acoustic ecology. And then when I came back and I did my postdoc, I did focusing on maned-wolf acoustic ecology, which was a focus that my students followed up as well. While a professor, we worked together with Julia, who is here today, on Southern right whale acoustic ecology. And we started soundscape ecology here in Brazil. Besides that, we are really interested in testing bio and ecoacoustic hypotheses, such as do all vertebrates produce sound? The acoustic adaptation hypothesis, acoustic niches, are there, evidence for all that? And also for social and vocal complexity, do they go together? And so what we do here, it's connect through the Ecoacoustic Research Hub. And we connect ideas, we connect people, and we connect dreams. So I'm just gonna try to get the stuff off my, okay. Because I'm just trying to get this thing out of my, can you see this label on top of, no? Okay, so I'll go ahead and,
Yeah.
because it's sort of, I can't see the slides. Oh, there you go. It's a little better now. Okay. So during my master's, I studied 2 species of manatees. I was interested on how different they sounded. And I figured that they have specific sounds depending on their motivation, their activity depended on their personality, but also on the individual. So they have identity in their calls. So both Amazonian manatees, Triquecos inunguis, and Antillean manatees, Triquecos manatus, they both occur here in Brazil, and they were the focus of my research. So I isolated them in captivity, recorded each of them, and measured their size. And I knew their age, and I knew their sex. So I found out that besides having like a signature, like an identity in their voices, that there's also information about sex and age classes. But that's not all there is. They actually recognize some of that difference. Mother and calves, the function of those calls are to maintain proximity and find each other after some temporary separation. So mother and calves recognize each other through sound, and mothers actually go to the speaker where it's playing back the sound of this, its calf, and starts kissing the speaker, totally different from this another calf of the same age and same sex that I play for that mother. She completely ignores it. So it's very, very interesting for me that mothers recognize their calves. It's logical because they spend 2 years of their lives nursing or accompanying these their calves. They have a long gestation, so it's a lot of investment to misplace parental care, to misplace nursing. So it makes all the sense. Let's see. It's not going forward for me. Oh, there you go. So after I did my master's, I went back to the Amazon, where I connect with colleagues and students with similar interests and focus as myself. And we decided to find out if we could make a census of Amazonian manatees in the wild, because if they have identity in their calls, it would be very interesting for conservation issues. We could count them, we could monitor their population trends. So I went back to the field, and I call your attention here to the recorder that I was using. It was a cassette recorder then. You guys probably don't know this. equipment, but it was much different from what we have today. Today we have, digital recorders, and my student, Katarina Choi, worked with better equipment and also better technology to detect whales in the wild, manatees in the wild. She also used, besides passive acoustics, she used a side sonar, so she could actually see. And you see in this other little yellow patch here that there's a manatee right there that she could find with active acoustics, so with a sonar. And now I reconnected to researchers from outside Brazil that have similar focus and interests as I. And we found together, so my two colleagues that are here today, that there is species-specific vocal ontogeny. Calves change the structure of their calls, and they change differently for different species. So we have Amazonian manatees, Florida manatees, and Antillean manatees that have different shapes, and that shape starts to flatten as they grow old. But this is us analyzing their call. And what I'm interested is to know, as I asked that mother and that calf, can you recognize that individual calf of yours? And the manatee, using playback, it was obvious that she did, but can different species recognize themselves vocally? And I have an answer for that, but it's not published yet, so you need to wait on that for a little bit. And then I moved on to one of my biggest interests, which is humpback whale acoustic ecology. Here at the lab, we focus on noise disturbance, social dynamics, vocal complexity, and cultural evolution. Why? Because we're putting a lot of acoustic energy in the seas, in the ocean, and I'm not going to preach to the choir here. You all know that animals may or may not be able to compensate the noise in their environment with their vocalization or activity patterns. So here is just a little figure from a recent meta-analysis that another student of mine, Lidiane Gomes, did. And she can, you can read it obviously, but not all taxa can deal the same way, compensating for noise. And that's something that we're interested in here at the lab. So I was particularly interested in how humpback whales, especially singing males, they're displaying to be able to access and mate with a female. How can they deal with noise disturbance caused by whale watching boats? And I was interested in that and in their social dynamics at those breeding sites. So that was the first time that we took a passive acoustic monitoring technology in South America. Obviously, I was a student at Cornell and I had funding from Canon. So I was able to go to Abrolhos Bank, where 80% of humpback whales that visit Brazil concentrate. And we see a very complex social dynamic and also very complex vocal displays that we think mediate intersexual selection or sexual interactions. So we took pop-ups, now they're called marus. Actually, I think now they're called rock hoppers, right? And so from 2003 to 2005, and we time synchronized those, and we deploy them in areas where humpback whales concentrate, in two areas. One area where there was a lot of boat traffic, and another area where boat traffic was virtually absent, because the whale watching boats, they have, you know, a timetable to obey, and they won't, you know, deviate from their route very much. So it was close enough that we knew it was the same population, but it was far enough from those two sites that we know they were independent. And so at the treatment site, at the site where there were boats, we followed the whales acoustically. So we pinpoint their locations, and then we track that location through time. And it's easy to do that with humpback whales because they have a song that follows sort of an order, sort of. And so we can locate multiple singers at the same time and track multiple singers through time. And we tracked also boats. We tracked with GPSs. So what we found is that 45% of the males that were engaged in singing stopped singing when boats were up to 4 kilometers away. And the ones that don't stop singing, they spend 23% more time moving away from the direction of the boat than moving to any other direction. So we see that whale watching boats, they cause displacement, spatial displacement, and cessation of vocal display. We are also interested in understanding, you know, how we could model the vocal activity of humpback whales, of male singers at that area. So we used model selection, and what we found out is that the number of singers that we could count for each time period that we sampled was more influenced by boats. Boat had a negative effect. So the more boat noise that we could detect on the recordings, the less or the least singers or the least males were singing at that time. But we also found a very strong effect of the moon phase and an interaction between moon phase, which is sort of related to tide. And we just had a couple of, if I'm not sure, but I think it's Japanese authors that found tide effect on humpback whale singing, male singing. And we found that as well. So we have more evidence, I think, from Hawaii and now from Japan. So yes, I was interested in knowing when males concentrate their singing activity. I was interested in how and where singers moved in the Abrolhos Bank, and what were the characteristics of their trajectories. That was led by one of my students called Lara Honda in her master's and in her PhD. And she was also interested in, I'm most interested in that as well, how they interact among themselves and with vessels. So again, we had recordings that contained humpback whale singers, boat noise, and we estimated singer trajectories by locating and pinpointing multiple notes from their song using pop-ups. So in the quieter area, song was detected continuously. So here we can see these plots. They're kind of weird, but I'll explain it to you. 0 hours, and then you go all the way in a clock, but it's a clock of 24 hours. And where I marked this little ball here. The blue ball, it marks the highest probability that that hour is the hour that you're going to find males singing in the treatment area. So it was at night around 1 a.m. And as for boats, we also were looking for boat noise. So we found that boats were at the treatment area around, most probably there was boat noise around between, noon and 3 o'clock, because they had that fixed schedule towards land and towards the island where they did the whale watching. But at the control site, we did not see a marked hour where they would concentrate singing activity. It was basically always. But we found the same pattern for the little bit of boat noise that we found in the treatment area in the control area. This is also the work of another student of mine, Tamires Casagrande, and this is not published yet, but she's preparing to submit. So what Laura saw when she looked into the types of trajectories. So singing males basically do exploratory behavior, slow, short, and uniform steps. And this movement was very restricted. Like half of the time they were basically in the same spot. Or they assume this directional movement with rare, fast, and long steps in their trajectories. And you can see these two lines of animation. They represent two interacting individuals. So we sometimes see that they're singing and holding their ground. Sometimes one is singing and then stops singing as another approaches, or sometimes you see them singing together. So we were tracking the whales, but they, I guess, are also tracking each other. So the highlights of the humpback whale acoustic ecology that I presented here today for you is that humpback male singers may be avoiding acoustic competition with boat noise, and they can be switching between behavioral states, probably because they're taking decisions about what is the optimal reproductive strategy to adopt at that point. And what's next about that? We're going to look into all these trajectories that we have now at the Abrolhos Bank. This is the archipelago right here. And we want to know what they're singing while they're interaction. And on that note, that's, joke. We looked into how notes are arranged in phrases and how phrases are arranged in themes. Everything that my dear Katie Payne, which has been honored by the lab not too long ago, discovered when listening to humpback whales. So I also was blown away by the complexity and the sheer beauty of humpback whale song. And I started doing recordings in 1999. You can see me here. We didn't have very good equipment. So I only had good equipment to work with when I first got a grant to look into humpback whale song in Brazil. It was the first grant to look into that in the country. So now I have over 20 years of data, and we're sort of tracking the themes. And here you see the little phrase patterns. There's also a little bit of variation within those phrase patterns, but you see that they change through time. And who is acquainted with the work of Alan Garland know that that is considered cultural evolution. So I was interested in comparing that to my colleagues. So we connected across the pond, right, to Gabon. So I connected with Dr. James Darling, one of the most impressive humpback whale song researchers in the world. And we found out that they can be considered the same cultural unit, because the song in Brazil and in Gabon changes through time, and it changes the same way, and the patterns are the same. So we knew there was a connection there. Later, I received a student from Serbia, Divna Jokic, who graduated not too long ago. Now she's my colleague, Dr. Jokic. And what she wanted to do, she came with this idea, with amazing idea, which is, okay, what about around South America, right? We have a population with it's the stock A population here and stock G population here. And also she got samples from Nicaragua, which is another stock, like an outgroup. And she looked into the song patterns in 4 different years and compared those around South America. This was only possible because we were able to connect with a lot of researchers at the Listening for Aquatic Mammals in Latin America workshop, which was a workshop that was thought about by me, Julia Dombrowski, that's here today, and a couple of other folks from Chile and Brazil, Susanna Buchan, that works with blue whales and humpback whales, and folks from France as well. So we had our workshop in 2016, 18, pandemic, 22, and the next one will be either in Ecuador or Mexico. So if you work anywhere in South America, Latin America, because we're sort of including Mexico now, please come and join us at the next Lamela workshop. So that also made us possible for us to connect with folks from Germany that work off of the Antarctica in the Southern Oceans. And they're putting all of the songs that we collected in Brazil. There was a lot of songs collected all through the coast, but mainly at Abrolhos and at Serra Grande, which is another place I'm going to talk to you guys about. We were able to actually understand a little bit about the dynamics of the cultural evolution in humpback whales and how their song is traveling across the pond and around South America. And that was actually very synergic, or serendipitous, I should say, with a work that we did using photo identification. We had several matches between the stock A and the stock G right around the time that we were analyzing the song. So humpback whales from Brazil are crossing over and feeding in the Antarctic Peninsula, where the stock G traditionally feeds. So this matching of the timing of life history transitions with ecosystem phenology, which is knowing where the prey is, the prey distribution, is critical for us to understand the acoustic ecology and the ecology of these migratory species. So probably the motivation for switching between feeding sites involves decision about their optimal survival strategies. And we have seen throughout the years a change in the abundance of humpback whales here in the Brazilian coast that coincides with these probable decisions about when to migrate where to migrate at all. So still with humpback whales, I'm going to talk about, and this is emotional for me because it's connecting with dreams. When I came to Natal, I was away from the Abrolhos Bank, but I met Júlio Baumgarten, who passed away a few months ago. And we had a dream together, a dream that is now the Baleias na Serra project, and where the humpback whales pass really close to the coast because the continental shelf there is the narrowest in the Northeast and in the east of Brazil. So it's a great opportunity because we have a very high mountain that we can look out. Sorry. Can I continue? Yes?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. So we're interested in, doing acoustic and visual surveys in the area for humpback whales, for dolphins. And that started with the PhD of Dr. Isabel Gonçalves, who is now the coordinator of the project. It's doing a great job over there and is now focused on the impact, again, the impact of port construction on the acoustic and in the ecology of humpback whales at that site. So more to come about our human disturbance and humpback whales. So now I'm going to talk about Julia. Julia's there. She could be talking about this than me, but it was a pleasure to work with her. She is an amazing, brilliant student, a brilliant researcher. And we were interested in understanding the acoustic ecology of southern humpback whales. They come to Brazil also to breed, and she showed that there are different notes, different calls that they use in the area, and that these calls mainly mediate dynamics between mother and calf pairs in the area. We also paired up with Dr. Susan Parks, connected with her. We have been connected since the Cornell days. She was a postdoc there when I was a PhD student. And we collaborated on this paper that shows, besides the spatial and temporal displacement of humpback whales in right whales, she showed spectral displacement when depending on what kind of background noise southern humpback whales were exposed to. So when there was fish chorus, the minimum frequency of southern right whales was lower. And then when it was quiet, it had like an intermediate value. And when there was vessel around, it sort of went up a little bit in frequency. So we know that they're able to have this vocal plasticity and change their some of the parameters, like what Ligiane Gomes showed in all those other taxa. And well, they have to escape through a lot of background noise, and we're overlapping our activities at sea with a lot of species that have their homes at sea. So Laura Honda started with me as an undergrad student, and she showed she did a revision of air guns and their spectral overlap with a bunch of marine mammals. And I was involved with the joint industry program. We did a review of fixed autonomous recorders and for passive acoustic monitoring. And the lab also, we have this role in informing, the stakeholders here in Brazil about, the best practices and about, the evidence about the influence of noise in marine mammals. So I'm going to move on totally now, switch gears and talk about terrestrial ecoacoustics. So I was fortunate enough to be invited to be in a defense committee of Dr. Marina Duarte. She was a master's student then. And we, at her defense, we started to talk about, we should look into mining noise. And we should look into how soundscapes can be characterized here in Brazil. I was fresh out from Cornell. Chris Clark has been my supervisor, so it was only natural that I started paying attention on acoustic scenarios, acoustic habitats, acoustic ecology. So I came back to Brazil eager to do some more with bioacoustics. And we started to characterize biomes, the noise influence across all the biomes in Brazil. And we connected through time with colleagues from another disciplines. So I connected with people from the computer science. I connected with people from physics, and I published 2 papers in a physics journal, which for me was a new thing. So going back to what generated all of that interest at the lab was Dr. Marina Duarte, and we wrote the first project to study the influence of mining activities on soundscapes and on animal communication in Brazil. And yes, you think that was changed the soundscape? Yeah, you were right if you thought it did. But besides the entire soundscape being altered, obviously, we were looking at, what is the contribution of its mine? And you have truck noise. It's in the order of almost 1,000 passes in the same roads there by day. Explosions, siren, you name it, trucks backing up. All of this makes noise in a mine. This is a mine for iron. So we did the soundscape characterization, and the regional acoustic ecology is affected, obviously, by that. All of those sounds that come from the mine. So we used the acoustic complexity index. We connected with Dr. Pieretti. She came to Brazil and started working with us, and we used that first index that sort of, we were all trying to propose metrics to translate biodiversity or ecological processes from recordings, from audio recordings into information. So we did that with her. And we were also the first ones to publish a work about insects and how insects are disturbed by noise, and particularly those truck passes. We also looked at how monkeys, how primates dealt with it close to the mind. We have a different acoustic activity throughout the day in an area where that species occurs and it's far away from the mine, and where there's a group that lives close to the mine. So their acoustic activity changed completely. And here in the state of Rio Grande do Norte, we have the highest number of aerogenerators for wind farms, right? So I had my first student in the ecology program here. I'm also in the psychobiology program here. And Elisiane Oliveira, she was interested in identifying all the temporal patterns in this seasonally dry forest. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that. And she used acoustic indexes, she used clustering, and she used temporal patterns and visualizations using the false color long-term spectrograms. So here's what I mean by seasonally dry. Here in this part of this slide, you see the area when it rains. So it's basically green, and we have a marked and long dry season. So it basically loses all of the leaves, and it's a lot of wind, which appeared very well in the long-term false color spectrograms. And the acoustic activity of the animals that we could identify through the indexes that we used also changed dramatically from when it was the wet season and when it was the dry season. So we also were interested in these seasonality patterns in soundscapes. As I mentioned before, she was interested in the impact or the influence of these aerogenerators. And we are now working with stakeholders and politicians here in the States, in the state of Rio Grande do Norte, to sort of limit the distance that these aerogenerators can be from people, mainly. And we don't have we don't have laws that protect biodiversity yet. We're working towards that. But mainly we're talking about how far away, what's the minimum distance that aerogenerators can be that they don't cause too much disturbance. And as of now, 900 meters seems okay, but we're not sure yet. We need to study that way more. Oh, and I forgot to mention here that we're trying to connect also with professors at the ecology program, looking into the future. I have 2 students, upcoming students, candidates, that will be looking at how restoration process sounds like. So we're going to follow areas that are in different points in the process of restoration and understand what they sound like, and also look into how the size and other features in fragments translate into soundscapes. And talk about broad interests, right? We're also interested in sort of providing evidence about bio and ecoacoustic hypotheses that are out there. I talked about a lot about Morton motivation structural rules when I was working with manatees. And now we're talking about Freeberg's social and vocal complexity hypothesis. And we actually found evidence that that is the case for the spotted paca, which is a rodent. And we contrasted the repertoire size with the group size, and we found that a very, very strong relationship. So supporting the social and vocal complexity hypothesis. We looked into that with mustelids as well, with giant river otters and that group. And we also found evidence that that is the case. This is not supposed to be here, this little frog. I'll just take it out and go back to, sorry about that. So we're interested in investigating if all vertebrates produce sounds. So that was something that we talked a lot about at Cornell. And another student that came to me asked me to help her to analyze the sounds that she was recording from Amazonian turtles, some river turtles, right? And I was like, are you sure? Because they were supposed to be mute, right? And we found out that no, they're not mute, they produce sound. And a very recent publication just was out talking about, you know, the evolution of sound production in a lot of taxa. So focusing mainly on turtles. Besides that, we also found that the first evidence that chelonians they offer parental care to their young. And this was also a surprise. So it's nice when you can back up or just totally change the hypothesis that people currently work with. And it's not changing. There you go. Another hypothesis that we were interested in testing was the acoustic adaptation hypothesis, that, you know, a pattern, a bioacoustic pattern that has evolved in an area propagates very well in that area and not so well in another area. So we found very much a controversial evidence about that using this Pitecopus nordestinus, this little frog that occurs both in the seasonally dry forest that I showed to you, a Caatinga, and the Atlantic forest. So Dr. Religiane Gomes did a work, her master's work, that I could supervise her, and she found out evidence, but it was mixed evidence that supports the acoustic adaptation hypothesis. Right now, we're looking into comparing and discovering really bioacoustic patterns in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. So we connected with the Navy, the Brazilian Navy, and with mining industries that are interested in what lies beneath the ocean floor. So all the geophysical features in the ocean, and we thought it was really interesting because I'm sure marine mammals are paying attention to that as well. And we're now boarding these Navy ships and towing an array of hydrophones along the route that they do until the São Pedro and São Paulo and São Pedro rocks, which is an island, an archipelago that sits almost on top of the mid-Atlantic ridge. And we're interested in putting, new species on a map. We have found already species that we didn't know that was there. And we're really interested in the high frequency folks, beaked whales and such. So more to come there. And I also connected, and I have a student coming from Europe again, not from Serbia like Divna, but from France. So I have a Sara Erle Vieira. She's coming from the Toulon University, and she's going to look with me and her advisor, Vigotin, into a correlation between what we can see from space and what we can hear using these subsurface drones that record the soundscape and detects the presence of marine mammals. And we're going also to see if there is a possible correlation with environmental DNA. And this odyssey is planned to occur next year. And she's coming here to Natal, and we're going to drive this drone until Chile. So all the coast of Brazil, from Natal downwards around South America to Chile. So that's supposed to bring really cool and interesting information forward. So we're connecting broad and wide, and we're connecting global. We're connecting with 3 global initiatives, the Life Plan, and we have a site here in Natal. This is us right here. I don't know if you heard or know about the Life Plan project. It's a planetary inventory of life. We use several methods to detect biodiversity, both in animals and plants and fungi and you name it. So the presence of the project is quite impressive, as is impressive the amount of people that have now collected and have explored partially or completely their recordings around the world. So I'm connecting with Kevin Badas and his group to collaborate on the Worldwide Soundscapes project. And finally, with GLUBS. GLUBS is this global library of underwater biological sounds that we're trying to put together. We're now, I think, 34 or 37 researchers directly involved in the developing GLUBS. And hopefully we're going to have this portal or this entity that will enable us to exchange, understand, import and export, see each other's data, understand our data better, associate the sounds that we have no idea what they are with somebody else's evidence that they are this. So I'm very, very excited about all of those initiatives and looking forward and at this bright future for sound science made by everyone and able, these initiatives will enable everyone to actually tap into the data and find out more quickly. So, I am interested in species bioacoustic patterns, and I am sure you all know that they're influenced by many factors, and the level of variation, inter-individual, intergroupal, interpopulational, will depend on, the ecological community they're in their social and ecological context. You know, there's a predator there, I'm going to be quiet. In their internal motivational context, and their genetic and phenotypical makeup, their sex, and their development, the ontogeny, their age classes. So those are just a few things that we could point out throughout this presentation. And you could see that I'm now broadly but focused on interests about sound science. What are the levels of variation in bioacoustic patterns? What are the applications of finding out those patterns for conservation? So we explore that in manatees, mandibles, marmosets, otters, turtles, dolphins, whales, and now birds, and we're going into bats with this new mini bat that one of my students, Luane Ferreira, which I'm not sure if I mentioned her, but she does all the man-wolf work. I'm interested in individual discrimination and recognition. We saw that in manatees, man-wolves, marmosets, otters, whales. The lab really works around signal evolution, how species-specific patterns and variations work, what culture has to do with signal evolution, and what are the drivers of signal evolution. And obviously, you saw that we're also interested in the human influence on acoustic communication and in the acoustic ecology of our planet. So this is my last slide. We have built together, making those connections, connecting the dots, as if you will, within the lab of bioacoustics. We really focus on sound science for nature. And I stopped counting at some point, but I had 71 students passing through the lab, 30 alumni, of which 28 are women, and 10 current students, which 9 are women. And so we connect and we support women in science. The Ecoacoustic Research Hub, is a new entity for us, and we are looking forward to even further connect sound science among everyone that appreciates sharing knowledge, sharing ideas, sharing dreams. And I have 100 of colleagues that I cannot name, but you are, and my colleagues usually become my friends. So I'm really grateful to be able to do this for so long and having such amazing people doing it with me. So thank you. This is it.
Thank you so much, Renata, for this inspirational and motivational talk. I think it's quite interesting that you see, for people in different stages of their career, even for newcomers, or people that have already established lab, we can pick up so many good examples of how to do science and do research. And sometimes we might feel like scared of entering in a new realm of maybe changing the biological group you've been studying for a long time, or even like a different environment that you've been researching. But we could see that it's kind of possible. And you just show that it's just a matter of breaking paradigms, right? Things that you've been studying for all your life, and that you addressed in your master's, in your PhD. Now you're taking a fresh look at those with all of your background in animal behavior and ecology. That is super interesting, that I admire a lot, in the way that you also try to put this sort of hypothesis testing in order to extract patterns that really matters for conservation. So I think it's an amazing line of research you've been developing. And I wish that Natal was closer to Campo Grande, so I knew that you existed before
I know, me too, because I think you do amazing work as well. So thank you again for inviting me, and thank you for reconnecting me to my alma mater. You know, I've always wanted to keep that connection, but through the years it became less strong. Let's put it this way. But I think now we will be able to reconnect. I'm actually testing a detector from Cornell in our marine data set. So we're going to see how that goes.
And with that, I would like also to open the floor for questions, and feel free, everyone, if you want to just raise your hand or open your mic or drop questions in the chat. Also, Renata, if you you had provided your email in the presentation, but if you want to drop it on the chat as well, so people can reach out to you. And oh my God, I see one of the cutest commentaries ever. You were named the queen of bioacoustics in the chat.
No, I don't want to. I want people to come work with me, but thank you. I appreciate it. Oh boy. So Fernando, we're now trying to put a society together, right? We started trying to we did put actually a Brazilian bioacoustic society together. And I think it's Fernando who have talked to Marino Duarte. Now they made a connection, and we're now thinking of making a Latin American bioacoustic society to facilitate connections. And I can't stress enough to those who are starting their career to go and connect. It's so important. It's so, I can't even tell you how productive I have become after I decided to just let my data loose. So if anybody needs data, here it is, you know, and here comes all these papers, you know, you don't even see they coming. So that's one thing that I would urge you guys to do. Connect with good people, obviously, people that are willing to share knowledge, to share with you data, methods. So, you know, do connect.
Yeah, this is really good advice for people really in different parts of their careers.
So thank you.
Sure. I can definitely share the talk that has been recorded here with you, Fernando, and others that might want to.
Hi, Dimitri. I miss you, Dimitri.
Hi, Renata. Great work.
Hi.
Great work.
Oh, thank you. You were part of it too.
Thanks. Proud to be part of it.
Yeah.
All right, so we're running over time here. I'd like to thank Renata once again. And as suggested by her, let's keep the connections flowing. So feel free to drop an email to Renata, and we will meet again next in 2 weeks. We'll have our end of the year session of acoustic methods, and that one is going to be more into creating connections and connecting, and we'll talk more details on that soon. But see you all in 2 weeks then, and thank you so much, Renata.
You're welcome. I appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.